Thank you, McLaren. Thank you, Andrea Stella. Thank you, Zach Brown. Thank you, the pit wall. Because you may be thinking, another Max fan. No, I'm not a Max Verstappen fan. No. But what I am is I am a hater of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. And thank God we have a championship battle to look forward to, a finale to actually look forward to, some intrigue for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Because, another thank you to McLaren, because if we didn't have this strategy, balls up today at the Qatar Grand Prix, would we really have anything else to talk about? Lewis Hamilton said it at the end of the race on the radio. One of the few things that I think his race engineer actually replied to. Was there any overtakes today at the Qatar Grand Prix? Well, there was an attempt at one with Nico Hulkenberg on Pierre Gasly, but brought out that very, very timely safety car. Couldn't have brought it out on a more perfectly timed safety car on lap 7, where the drivers, the whole field, except McLaren, were committed to that two-stop strategy and committing to 2 full stints on the mandatory 25 tyre age limit. And, well, everyone up and down the grid thought that was a good idea. Haas thought it was a good idea. Alpine thought it was a good idea. Red Bull most definitely thought it was a good idea. Except for McLaren, who just didn't expect everyone else to pit and wanted flexibility for a safety car that could potentially in the future happen. Unless you've got a crystal ball, McLaren, I don't know why you are playing around with those potential permutations or eventual possibilities. You literally have a safety car right here in front of you in a 2-stop race where you can get a free pit stop. That's basically what Max Verstappen got. It was just unbelievable scenes. But thank you for taking this championship battle to the last race of the season and making it even more intriguing and interesting than I ever thought it was going to be. Because, let's be real, after you saw the start of this weekend with the sprint race and even qualifying, even Max Verstappen fans, you knew that Max really wasn't going to win this on outright pace alone. Hell, he had good pace and probably better pace than I expected him to. He still was slower than that of Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris. Definitely slower than Oscar Piastri, that's for sure. The man was on form this weekend. Like the return to Oscar Piastri that we have seen in the early stages of this season, the first half of the season, the man that disappeared for the last 8 races when we went to circuits which just didn't suit his liking. But Qatar is definitely an Oscar Piastri track, and it showed this weekend. And you gotta feel sorry for him. You got to feel sorry for Norris as well. Not if you're a Max Verstappen fan, of course. You're over the moon. But, those two didn't do anything wrong this weekend. It is McLaren's fumble, just like it was their fumble in Vegas. How is Max still in this championship? I don't even think he knows. And he rightfully said it before this race weekend. I'm in this championship still because of the failure of others. And people jumped on the bandwagon there having a go at him about this, but mate, that's a quote that is going to go down in history because they've done it again. They've done it again. And I could see myself maybe on the form that they're on. Are they going to make it 3 for 3 in Abu Dhabi? Won't put it past them. Of course, last year they did fare much better there. They were the dominant package there last year. Lando Norris won from pole position. Of course, Oscar Piastri got taken out by Max Verstappen in the first corner at Abu Dhabi last year. So we don't know how his race would have panned out overall. In relation to his teammate, it is a track that I suspect Lando Norris will fare much better at than Oscar Piastri, but it will still be close between them. I'm so glad Abu Dhabi is it still going to be a good race? I don't know. I still have low expectations, just like I had low expectations here. But yeah, what are they doing? Do they even want to win the Drivers' World Championship? You do have to wonder. And I think this is worse than 2007. If he wasn't born for 2007, or he was too young to remember 2007. McLaren, with Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton in his rookie year, also had quite a sizable lead in the closing races. And they ballsed it up. Lewis Hamilton, they left him out too late in China, and he ended up in the gravel and lost a whole host of points there with an unnecessary DNF. And the last race of the season, they fought between themselves and Kimi Räikkönen. In the last race, maybe it's fate. In the last race, had a 12-point gap to both McLaren drivers, just as Max Verstappen finds himself with heading into the finale, and he won the race due to the errors and issues that both McLaren drivers had. Removing any conspiracy theories with Spygate and whether they were even allowed to win the championship, but even so, no one backed Kimi Raikkonen, and he won his sole world championship that way. I mean, Max is very different. He's got 4 world titles, unlike Kimi Raikkonen at the time, and he is just going about his business, isn't he? I mean, Max didn't really do much today. Let's be real. It was a good drive, but he was on the grippier side of the racetrack at the start. Everyone who started on the inside line on the dirtier side, Norris, Russell and Hadjar, they lost positions at the start of the race. Russell and Hadjar more so than Norris, who only lost a single position to Max. Then after that, they just moved out of his way. He just was driving in clean air for the majority of the race. He allowed the McLarens to go do what they need to do at the safety car restart, but he'd already gained that free pit stop on them. So, wild scenes today. I bet even he is chuckling to himself right now and just going on his plane home, or plane ride to Abu Dhabi right now, just going, how am I 12 points behind Lando? Well, it wasn't that long ago. I was over 100 points behind both of them. Like, what the hell? Massive fumble for the two McLarens. Yes, they've had their own mistakes, McLaren drivers, Norris and Piastri. If they'd kept it clean themselves, they should have Max mathematically out of the equation right now, and it should be a straight fight between the two of them in Abu Dhabi. But McLaren have a hand in this on the plate to Max. Lando did what he needed to do in Vegas. He finished P2 at a track where McLaren are historically weak at. He should have really put Max out of mathematic contention right now. But he ended up gaining a full 25 points on Lando and on Oscar Piastri. And now he's just gained another 15 points here because Lando, fortunately, was able to overtake Kimi Antonelli, because Kimi, unlike what GP said on the radio, which is totally wrong in my personal opinion, saying Kimi, might have been tongue-in-cheek, but he said Kimi gave that position up to Lando and let him by. And well, if you see any of the social media comments on Kimi Antonelli's pages, social media pages, they're quite disgusting. And unfortunately, I feel like that there has to be a little bit of duty of care from those on the pit wall and the drivers. Of course, they're not necessarily in control of what everyone can do. Of course, they can't. But silly comments like that can have quite kind of real-world repercussions. Now, these days, it shouldn't happen. But it is what it is, and they're also not fully responsible for everyone's actions, so I totally get that. But I think even there was images of Toto Wolff and the head of communications at Mercedes chatting to GP afterwards, possibly, most likely, about that comment from Kimi Antonelli, because it did seem a little bit kind of backhanded, and it was a genuine mistake by Kimi. He was pushing. He'd got into the dirty area of Carlos Sainz as Carlos Sainz was starting to struggle. Kimi probably wanted Sainz to stay a little bit further away from him, to be honest, so that he could keep Lando Norris at bay, which he was doing. But then he made that mistake through turn 15, which allowed Lando Norris to get through. He was on much fresher tyres, had better grip, but not enough to get past Kimi. So it was only due to that mistake. Otherwise, Kimi probably would have held Norris off. And how important will those 2 points be at the end of the season? It means that if Max wins the last race, which is still a tall order because he is going to be probably the second best car again. Similar position to here at Qatar. Of course, it's a track he's fared much better at, had more success at than at Qatar. But still, that Red Bull probably going to be second best to the McLarens at Abu Dhabi, but it doesn't. He had the slower car today. McLaren are still making strategies. If the same people on the pit wall were making strategy decisions this week and making the setup choices, then anything is possible, as he said. So what a race. I didn't expect it. I didn't expect it. I was hoping Oscar Piastri would win the race. He'd at least extend the championship to Norris, and there would be a 15-point gap at least going into Abu Dhabi. Little did I expect Max Verstappen, of all people, would be the one in P2 and challenge it, the closest challenger to Lando in Abu Dhabi. So yeah, Max only needs to win the race, and for Lando Norris to finish P4, the exact same result here, and he will win on countback because he would have 8 total race wins, because he currently has, believe it or not, the same amount of race wins as both McLarens. It's laughable. Absolutely laughable. But that is Max Verstappen. He has maximised that car's potential whenever it has been in the window to win races. And even when it hasn't been in the window swimming races, he's still there. He's still there because you just never know in this sport. You just never know. And especially when you're coming up against two drivers and a team that hasn't won a Drivers' World Championship in nearly 2 decades. They've only just won their first Constructors last year for that period of time. And now they, of course, are still trying to play the fair game. That's probably why they didn't bring both drivers in. They didn't want to bring Lando in. They didn't want to split the strategy because it would have been unfair against another driver. And, well, what they would have done at least is ensured that both of their drivers would be P1 and P2 and more likely to win the World Championship in Abu Dhabi. Then, least of all, Max Verstappen, because they've allowed him to just not even sneak up, really. They've just allowed him to walk through. Off you go, sir. In you come. Welcome, welcome. P2, why don't you find yourself a spot in between myself or between our two drivers? That's what they've done. That's exactly what they've done. And wouldn't be surprised if it happens in Abu Dhabi next weekend. So, yeah, lots to talk about, of course, between now and then. We'll do our race preview, of course, lots to look forward to for Abu Dhabi. And, yeah, one final tip of the cap to McLaren. Thank you for making this to go down to the last race of the season.